I'm often asked or receive requests about covering Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon games outside of my particular wheelhouse. I stick to console games and the occasional modern PC game to make things simpler in video game history, but there are plenty of games that fall outside of those parameters. 90s and early millennium CD-ROM games, flash games, even the Hyperscan gets a mention from my viewers. Something that isn't really brought up though is old school Java mobile games. The pre-smartphone era was actually pretty big on gaming. By the time I eventually got a smartphone, I had played dozens of mobile games on my tiny Sony Ericsson. There are about a dozen or so games of this type covering Nick and Cartoon Network franchises. Some of the shows to get games on this platform actually never received their own console games, like the one I'm covering today. Courage the Cowardly Dog Haunted House was an arcade-style isometric shooter exclusively for Java phones. As far as I can tell, this is the only time Courage got its own video game outside of Flash games on CartoonNetwork.com. It was developed by Macrospace and released sometime before 2005. I couldn't find anything more accurate for the release date, but seeing as Macrospace merged with another company to form Glue Mobile in 2005, who are still around today by the way, it had to have been released sometime before then. Macrospace also developed Samurai Jack, Samurai Showdown and a Wacky Racers game, so they were no strangers to Cartoon Network. The aim of Haunted House is incredibly simple. The game is divided up into levels, which are singular rooms within the titular haunted house. You have to clear each room of monsters to successfully move on to the next room. As you're doing this, you'll be racking up a score, which can be multiplied by collecting the pies scattered around. As this is an arcade shooter, getting high scores is much of the fun, but the score also ties into your lives. Every time you hit certain thresholds, an extra life will be added on to help extend your run. Haunted House is entirely about seeing how far you can go and how high you can run up the score. It wouldn't have been out of place in an 80s arcade. You're just battling through each room trying to stay alive. I'm not even sure if there's a final level or whether the game infinitely loops until Courage finally drops dead for good. Courage fights off the hordes of creatures with a gun of some sort, which was fired by pressing the 5 button on your keypad. Movement controls were obviously tied to your directional buttons, and this is where you'll first run into the limitations of a Java game. Having Courage navigate the rooms is incredibly clunky. In a different style of game, I don't think this would have been as noticeable. But because things get so intense here and you're trying to pull off twitch movements to get out of trouble and stay alive, the clunkiness is way more pronounced. Gameplay would be ridiculously boring if it was just Courage firing a gun, so they include a couple of power-ups to spice things up. The first you'll find is a bomb, which acts as a screen clearing attack. Whenever you pick this up, every monster in the room is instantly vaporized. Then as you play through some more levels, you'll find Eustace's Mask, which upgrades your single line of fire gun to a scatter shot for a short period of time. These two power-ups breathe some extra life into the gameplay and keep it from getting too boring. Maybe they exist deeper into the game, but I would have liked to see more of these. I feel like they could have gone all out with these power-ups to keep you motivated to play, as well as beef up the strategy aspect of the gameplay. You'll often be scrambling for these when they spawn on screen because levels can get quite frantic. In particular, the third room you play through is super cramped, creating plenty of stressful moments where you're trying to weave Courage through traffic and out of harm's way. Enemies start off as just zombies and pumpkins, but new monsters will be introduced down the line that take more hits to kill or they're a little harder to hit. Additionally, those initial monsters will get some upgrades, like the zombie doing a little jog. Then there's the 3 levels featuring cats, one of Courage's most iconic villains. In these levels, cats can attack you, but the main focus is on protecting Eustace or Muriel, who Cats is constantly creeping towards. If Cats gets to them before you've cleared all the monsters, you lose. Unfortunately, these levels are mostly an annoyance. His bomb attack is pretty OP. It has such a wide area of effect, which is pretty chaotic when Courage dies with a single hit. And the more I played, the more I spotted these little annoyances. When enemies spawn, they're given invincibility frames, which I thought was pretty bizarre. I can't recall another game I've played that has done this before. Similarly, Courage's hitbox is a little unfair. It felt like many of my deaths came from enemies who weren't really close to hitting me. Little annoyances like this are basically par for the course in Java games, at least in my experience. Every time I'd download a new mobile game, I'd dig it initially, but the more I played, the more I'd find these little grievances, until eventually it was too much and I was over the game for good. Probably the biggest problem with Haunted House is that the game only has 6 unique levels. Once you get to level 7 in your run, the game just starts repeating room layouts, which drastically takes the fun out of things. This is a game designed for you to constantly come back to it and try to grind further and further, but the motivation to do that drops away when you know you're just repeating levels after like 5 minutes of playing. Randomly, you'll get a bonus level to play for an extra life, which is just a generic brick breaker. Super out of place here and really caught me off guard. I would have much rather seen this bonus level at least slightly try to be courage themed. As I've said, going for a high score is a major part of a game like this, and what I found really neat was that Haunted House had online leaderboards. That seems pretty cool for the time this game came out. I imagine it would have been a big boost for the game's replayability. Visually, I really like the game's sprite work. The game looks really nice, and I think it captures the style and essence of Courage very nicely. It's almost so nice that it makes the very limited amount of levels an even bigger negative, expanding the environments and even including some iconic locations from episodes would have been cool to see. I can't really give the same praise when it comes to audio, mostly because music is non-existent here. There's no music during levels, so your gameplay is only accompanied by the bleeps and bloops of the sound effects. It makes for a rather unsettling experience, so maybe it's actually really clever, seeing as Courage was a creepy show. Overall, I like Courage the Cowardly Dog Haunted House for the most part. This game, like most Java titles, clearly isn't designed to be binged. The gameplay loop is made for short bursts, with the pool being trying to get higher scores as you become more confident in the game's controls and strategy. I was a big fan of Java mobile games growing up. In high school, I didn't have a smartphone until I was pretty close to graduating, so to entertain myself on bus rides to and from school, I was either listening to the 10 songs that I could fit on my Sony Ericsson, or I was playing some sort of Java game. Courage the Cowardly Dog Haunted House could have definitely been one of those games I had in rotation as a fun boredom buster. And that's it for the first Video Game History Mobile Minis episode. I'm thinking of doing these on weeks where getting out a regular video game history episode isn't possible. If you enjoyed it and want to see more videos covering obscure Java, Nick and Cartoon Network games, let me know in the comments below.